Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. On today's episode of Resiliency Redefined, I feel so fortunate to have welcomed Dorie Clark. Now, that's a name, a household name. This is a person who's done some remarkable work on many different areas around entrepreneurship, around long-term thinking and goals. Today, Dorie and I dived into how do we stay focused on our long-term goals, long-term thinking in a world that feels like it's just set up for, it's just full of distractions. It just is full of all of these interrupts. And what do we need to unlock for us to be able to achieve and hit those long term goals that we have when the world feels like maybe it's designed not for us to be able to do that? So please join me for this conversation with Dorie Clark. She is a gem. I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation on this episode of Resiliency Redefined. So I'm thrilled to be here with Dorie. Today we're having a conversation about all things that are just so top of mind for me. I know personally, but also people I'm talking about. Is this idea about like reinvention? Like, how do we figure out what we're doing, how we're doing it, especially when it's like tied into our identity of this is what we're doing and this is the person who knows all the things. I have learned so much from Dorie's works. I'm so excited to welcome you to this episode of Resiliency Redefined. Thank you for making time for us today.
Robyne, thank you. So glad to talk with you.
Okay, so you're the type of when I see your name cross something, whether it's an article, whether it's a book, I'm just like I gravitate to it because you show up in just such this like thought provoking, but like really like oh my gosh, that makes sense. Like you make sense of things that sometimes feel a wee bit complicated. So can you tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing so we can share it with our audience who might not have had a chance to see your work, but they will now in this community. But could you just tell us a little bit about the work you do and what's really driving you right now in terms of your curiosities and what does this look like?
Yeah, absolutely. My most recent book, I'll pull it down. It's called The Long Game: How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World. And so, a lot of what I've been thinking about these days is just this question of how do we keep moving forward on the goals that we at least claim are important to us, all the
Yeah,
the long-term visions, the aspirations we have when we're pulled in so many directions in the near term. And that's a challenge that we all face all of the
yeah,
time, and I wanted to really understand how we can dive into that and handle it so that we can get ideally the best outcomes possible. Over the years, some other topics that I've written about in books and spent a lot of time thinking about include professional reinvention,
yes,
how
yes,
to position yourself as a thought leader in
yes.
different spaces, and also how to build a strong entrepreneurial career.
Yeah, I love all of it, and that piece around reinvention was my first introduction to your work, and I love just to hold space for the title, that idea about like that, like the long game when we are just inundated with a society that's built around distractions and noise and, that kind of instant peace, and you're really providing folks this framework to be able to like have that idea on that goal on the horizon. And I would just love to hear more about what you're seeing right now with all of these distractions, with all of this, divisiveness and all this almost sometimes it feels like noise that how on earth can we possibly have focus when, for example, we know the average adult is looking at their cell phones over 300 times a day, right? So where do we even start to get focused, Dorie? We're leaning into you as the expert.
Yes, thank you. Well, one piece of it is that I think a lot of us feel like, in some ways, we just need to give up on
Yeah.
long-term thinking because, like, what's the point anyway?
Yeah.
Everything's changing, everything's crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's true that of course there are things that are big unknowns that we're dealing with now. What
Mhm.
is the impact of AI going to be?
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about that. Is the stock market going to spike or
Yeah.
collapse? Are we in a bubble or not? Are all of the jobs going to go away in the
Mhm.
next 3 to 5 years, or is this going to be the biggest investment boom of all time? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody really knows.
Mhm.
Um, the uncertainty in this particular case is different, but it's true that there's always things that people worry about, and we kind of
Yeah.
forget them over time. I mean, I think about back when I was growing up, a big thing that everyone was completely stressed about was acid rain. And it was
Yes.
like, oh no, acid rain is going to
Yeah.
destroy forests, is going to kill us all.
We're the
And now,
dinosaurs. We are
that's
they'll be the
right.
dinosaurs. We're gonna be wiped out. Yes.
We will. And you know what? We fixed acid rain. That is
Yeah.
actually not a thing that anybody talks about, that anybody is worried about anymore. So society has a way of adjusting to things.
Yes.
I think that it's really important to maintain enough perspective that we can't afford to give up on long-term thinking, because the
Right.
metaphor that I like to use is that, we're all in an ocean, and this is ocean of uncertainty. And the
Mhm.
question is, do you want to be the jellyfish that's just floating around wherever the
Mhm.
wave is taking you? Or do you want to be the speedboat?
Yeah.
And it's true that sometimes there are waves that are so big, even a speedboat can't go over them. You have to reroute, you have
Yeah.
to figure out something different. But you are a lot more likely to
Yeah.
get to the place you want if you are a speedboat operating under your own volition,
Yeah.
rather than just floating around and saying, wow, I hope great things happen.
Yeah, I absolutely love that analogy, and just to hold space about the acid rain, when I'm talking to groups and teams around, like, well-being and health, which is an area I'm super interested in, we often talk about the idea that, like, it was aspartame and margarine that were going to kill us, right? Like, those were the things where it was like, as long as you avoid aspartame and margarine, like, you're guaranteed elderhood. Where now, like, everything's going to kill us, and it's the same, like, I remember as a kid growing up thinking that there literally was, like, this ozone hole above us and acid rain, and my hairspray was gonna be the thing that puts us over the edge, right? Like, you're so right that in the moment, these things feel, like, unsolvable. They feel like those wicked problems where they feel unsolvable, they feel overwhelming, and if we focus too much on that, we lose the actions that we can take today that perhaps we can course correct or perhaps allow us to take a different trajectory again. So we're not like helplessly just the victim of, wow, too bad we lost the lottery of what decade we were born in. It's like, no, no, no. Like, this is literally something that we can do when we maintain perspective. And I absolutely appreciate how you ground that for us.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I mean, just to put a point in that, you're exactly right. I mean, now all of the rage on social media is about protein maxing, and it's amazing. When we were growing up, I say we, right? I don't know
Yeah.
how old you are. But anyway,
Yeah.
when I was growing up,
Yeah.
everybody was freaked out about eggs, that you couldn't
Yes.
eat eggs
Yep.
because the cholesterol in eggs would like kill everybody. It turns
Yes.
out that's completely not a thing. And
Yeah.
now, people are wolfing a million of them to get the protein.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, not only that the things that we worry about, oftentimes because of technology, because of
Yeah.
policy changes, we can find collectively a way to solve them. But it's also true that sometimes the interpretation that people are absolutely so certain of in the moment turns out to just literally be the opposite of what is correct.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that so very much, and I would love to put a point in the point if we can continue putting points, like we have a pegboard by the end of this.
Yeah, what
It's
else was wrong in the
yeah,
80s, Robin? Let's go.
absolutely. What's going on here? What I also just find fascinating is that when we're in it, like when this is our like immediate circumstance, like I just want to hold space that it is so real and it's visceral that we believe this to be absolutely true, right? And again, even if we take a couple decades beyond that or before that, it was the moms that were encouraged to smoke during pregnancy to make the delivery easier to have smaller babies. Like we have learned a lot about the exposure to carcinogenics, and obviously that's not medically sound information that's given today. But again, it's like, okay, don't worry. We've been at these moments where we think that there's something that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense, but we're able to evolve. Like we're able to change. And I know a lot of folks have a very fractured relationship with change. I get super excited about change because it just means that we have another opportunity to reinvent. And sometimes we need a revolution, sometimes we need evolution. Like it's just this idea that it gives us agency to be able to tackle these big, wicked problems that we are facing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, if we want to help people maintain perspective, like we want to have the eye on the horizon, those long term goals, knowing what we're working towards. And again, I'm imagining for people listening, like all of our long term goals, they probably look pretty different. Like, not everybody is on the same path or the same trajectory. Can you tell us a wee bit about your framework around how you help position this idea about what people can be doing today that's going to really benefit them tomorrow?
Well, I'll tell you in the shortest amount of time,
Yeah.
which is the very quick way that I think about how to be a better long-term thinker. If you want to boil it down almost like a Zen koan, the
Yeah.
way to think about it is if you want to be a better long-term thinker, find a way to do a favor for your future self.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
really the key because ultimately there's a lot of interesting research, where researchers literally will show people pictures of themselves that have been artificially
Yeah.
aged, and then say like, okay, what are you doing for this person, because we have a hard time connecting ourselves presently with the future. And I mean, certainly that's true 40 years from now when we
Yes.
look different and we're wrinkled
Yeah.
and whatever, but it's also true even a week from now. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't really want to do that now. I'll figure it out
Yeah.
sometime. And then, a week later, you're like, oh no, I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
should have written that report. And
Yes.
so the general question is, if we can be thoughtful of our future self and say, okay, I'm going to do a thing today, which maybe it's a little inconvenient, maybe I
Yeah.
don't really want to do it, but I know that it will really help out my future self and they will be grateful, because a little bit of inconvenience today is going to stop things from being extremely problematic a week or a month or a year from now. Then that is the thing that is kind to do.
I absolutely love that. If it's okay, Dory, can I digress for a second and share a little story that like captures what you just described? Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
okay with you? So, Dr. Peter Attia, he wrote the book Longevity and Outlive. And sorry, I think I'm like Longevity, Outlift. I think he might have done both. Anyway, so medical doctor basically says he created this checklist that says if you can do these things now, and I'm 46, if you can do these things now at 90, you'll be able to do these things, right? So he kind of gave us this prescription almost to be able to do this now. Your future self will thank you. And I can share with you one of the things on that list was, can you farmer carry
Mm.
it was like I think it was, and I'll make sure in the show notes we have this correct because I don't want to misreference this by any means, but it was like three-quarters of your body weight for, I believe it was 60 seconds. And if you can farmer weight three-quarters of your body weight for 60 seconds, then you'll be able to open a jar at 90. Like that is his prescription. So, Dory, I was so excited about this, ran down to the gym, grabbed some free well, did some math quick, grabbed my weights, and I'm standing there and I'm like, get that sacred shake. Like, when you're lifting heavy things and you get that little sacred shake and I
How
hit.
badly did you injure yourself?
Oh, exactly. No injuries in this story, I can assure you. But then I did it, and then that night at the dinner table, we were talking about our highlights with the family, and I have 3 teenagers, so I was, like, super excited to be like, "Dudes, I'm gonna be able to open a jar at 90. This is why based on Dr. Peter's work." And then all of a sudden, my youngest, like, burst out laughing, and I'm like, "Jax, what's so funny?" He goes, "Mama, you can't even open a jar now." So I'm like, but I'm gonna get better, right? I'm gonna invest in it. But what I and he's not wrong. A lot of times I can't open jars. But what I loved about that idea is that Dr. Peter was like challenging us in this like supportive way to realize what you do today will matter in our future. And I think we have this tendency of overestimating that we'll have time to figure that stuff out later, right? I think we have a very different relationship with future self and future time, and we just think we'll have way more of it. And yet today we find we never have enough time today. So what makes us think that our future self is going to be better resourced with the gift of time and opportunity?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, one of the hacks that people suggest sometimes, which I think has a lot of merit, is if an invitation comes in to do something, for a ways in the future, next month, next
Yeah.
year, you need to ask yourself, if this was an invitation for tomorrow, would I do it?
I like
And
that.
there are certain things, I mean, of course, your calendar's probably busy tomorrow, but leaving aside like, oh my God, I'd have to cancel 8 meetings.
Yeah.
Would you be excited to accept it, or would you not really? Because it's true. I mean, it's also sort of a Netflix effect where people are always saying, "Oh, I want to watch the foreign film," and
Yes.
then
Yes.
but someday I want to watch the boring esoteric foreign
Yeah.
film. That's the kind of person I want to be.
I
But
won't
tonight I want
yeah.
to watch Super Bad again.
Yes. I love that. I love that. This ideal self, right? Like in the future, or this is what I would love to be, that aspirational self versus our reality selves. I absolutely appreciate that example. So when we think about that notion of like bringing in some of those guardrails, so this isn't like we're forecasting 45 years out. We're just saying like, hey, would I be able to do this tomorrow? Are there any particular behaviors, habits, activities that when we think about entrepreneurship or we think about however we define our business success, that you see, hey, these are the ones you want to be thinking about?
Yeah, when it comes to, business or entrepreneurial success, I think there's a few things that are foundational habits that are useful. In fact, in the long game, one starting point, we've kind of touched on this a little bit. Nearly a third of the book about, this is a book about long-term thinking, right?
Yes.
Nearly a third of it is actually about how to clear what you're doing now and create more
Yes.
white space. Because the biggest problem that I found, I mean, there's a huge gap of what gets in the way with people. They all want to do long-term thinking, but you literally cannot if your schedule is so compressed
Yes.
with things that are about today and about this urgent thing. So step 1 is just get a little space in there so
Yeah.
that you have margin to do it. So I think one of the best disciplines is getting much more methodical about what you're saying yes or no to.
Yeah, I love that. And a dear friend of mine, Jay Papasan, who wrote The One Thing, he talks about this idea that, like, when we're creating, when we're doing, when we're achieving, when we're performing, if we're not intentional, we don't leave a lot of room for reflection. We don't leave a lot of room for dreaming. We don't leave a lot of room for, again, even just kind of imagining or kind of repositioning things. And so you're absolutely right. When these blocks are just back to back to back, there's very little space. I hear what you're saying in terms of that white space, those margin spaces. And again, I really love that. Just, it's not this idea that it's new to us, but just that reminder of like, what are we saying yes to? And I question I often love to follow up with that is like, why are we saying yes to that? Right. Because I think sometimes we say yes to things for reasons that perhaps aren't actually in alignment with our long-term thinking goal or with our long-term thinking and or our goals, but even our values. So I really appreciate that. And if we had someone kind of sitting with us right now and they said, Dory, I feel like I can't say no to things. I feel like it's just everything feels like I'm almost stuck in a reality of my own creating, but I'm stuck in it. And that person's feeling pretty overwhelmed. Where do you suggest we can start?
Yeah. So in the real world, how
Yeah.
we're actually doing this, I think one great suggestion for people who are feeling overwhelmed at work, that
Yes.
presumably if they're working, I mean, entrepreneurs is a whole nother problem because we're doing this to ourselves. But
Yes.
if you have a boss, it is really useful. We often worry that it is a sign of weakness, that like we
Yeah.
can't handle all the things that are thrown at us. But a manager is not expecting you to solve everything. A manager is expecting you to take it as far as you can. And then they're actually glad to provide guidance because their
I
whole
like that.
job as a manager is to provide guidance. So you don't want to, go in and be like,
Yeah.
figure it all out for me. But if you can go in a really rational way and say, okay, here is the list of all the things I need to do.
Mhm.
I've looked at this and just realistically, I am not sure how to fit it all in.
Yeah.
Can we strategize together? Is there something where I can get help from
Yeah.
somebody? Are certain things more important than others and I should do them first, but this can maybe be stretched out? Help me think it through. And
Yeah.
that is totally viable and they can be your thought partner with it.
Yeah.
If it is on the personal side or things that are not necessarily business related, one of the things that I think is useful to consider, and I actually did a kind of popular TEDx talk about this,
Yes.
which was called "The Real Reason You're So Busy and What to Do
Yes.
About It." Um, it's useful to kind of look a little deeper because it
Yeah.
turns out there's interesting research about the fact that we often are again and again getting ourselves in a situation where we are over busy and overworked by our own designs
Yeah.
because it fulfills an emotional need for ourselves, and it makes us feel in demand and necessary and popular, and those are kind of powerful feelings that we sometimes are loath to give up even when
Yes.
we claim that we don't want to be so busy.
Yeah, I love that, and you are very humble in terms of that TED Talk, let me tell you. That TED Talk is on many top lists, for people, just to give context, Dory's being very humble. That is a groundbreaking TED Talk, just for folks who haven't had a chance to check that out, although I know millions have. What I wanna just pull out, there's 2 threads I would love to pull on what you just shared, is I loved how you gave the example of going to your leader, your boss, your manager, whoever you were reporting to, and basically just mapping out like, hi, these are my priorities. And I personally remember years ago when I was working in the academy doing this with actually one of my deans, where I went and said, just for clarification, this is all the things that you asked me to have done for the end of term. I just want to be absolutely crystal clear. Which ones are the priorities is what I said in that particular situation, because I knew it was not even within reasonable human limits that a person could actually do all of these deliverables. And I was actually curious if they actually realized that they had actually assigned that much to me. And it was
Yeah, so
wild because
what do they say?
and they were just like, no, like, wow, they had no idea that they had actually put all of that on my docket. And again, that was just a matter of this person had a lot of people that they were navigating and reporting structures, and it was like one of those moments where we met each other kind of in this middle place where he said like, that's a lot to ask of somebody. And I said, yeah, it feels it. Yes. But I also wanted to I wanted to perform. I wanted to show up. I really, really wanted to do right by this person. So I didn't, again, as you highlighted, like I didn't want it to look like I wasn't capable. I believed if I had perhaps a wee bit more time, I probably could have, but it wasn't realistic. And then when I said, what are the top three? We were able to then figure that out. But what I love is the language that you said is help me think this through. Like, I just think that I just wanna underline that, help me think this through, because it isn't accusatory, it isn't blaming, it isn't, admitting defeat, it isn't anything that becomes, like, really personalized, that could make people perhaps feel vulnerable. It's literally, "Hey, I'm looking to you, help me think this through," and I just think that's such a rich branch of a conversation point that will really help people be able to navigate some conversations in the workplace, but even personally as well. Help me think this through. Like, that's powerful.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I think that's right. And if you really are in a situation at work where you feel like you're being asked to do things that are just absolutely impossible, most likely there is some kind of a disconnect. And so having an
Yes.
honest conversation is really useful because number one, in your case, it could be that the leader literally just didn't remember how
Yeah.
much they had
Yeah.
asked you to do.
Totally.
They
Yeah.
lose track. They're busy delegating away, and they forget that they asked you to do it all. Another possibility is that what you are envisioning them requesting is very different. You might think,
Yeah.
oh, they need me to do this like polished report and it's got to be 40
Yes.
pages. And they're like, no, I wanted you to outline some ideas.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
So you need to get clarity on that. And also it's true that you might understand you might be aligned with what the scope is, but it's also possible you might not know how to do it in a way. There might be some hack that you're
Yeah.
not aware of. I
Yeah.
have a colleague who, was in a situation where she thought, "Oh no, in order to do this, I have to, rewrite this whole thing based on the person who's doing the thing." And it turns out that in order to do it, it was literally like, okay, press a button and it converts into this other thing. And
Yeah.
she thought in her mind that she had to rewrite it all from scratch. I mean, those are
Wow.
very different
Yeah.
scenarios.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Sorry, I digress again. Welcome to my world. I try my best to stay on focus. So talking to someone about focus, it's literally taking all of my little mental energy vibes to stay on task. But what I just love you just said in that example, it reminds me of the time where we were watching our daughter. She was getting a PowerPoint presentation ready, and I kid you not, Dory, she was putting a period, and then she would highlight it, and then she would put the font size to like 80, and then, like, she would go and we watched her do it, and then all of a sudden, my husband, who is in IT, just paused and he's like, "Darling, what are can you, help me understand what you're doing?" And she's like, "Oh, this is how you make the dots." And then he showed her the bullets, and literally it was this, like, mind explosion, and she was just like, and then there was this awesome little conversation that ensued around, like, gatekeeping, as in, like, should I tell the other people? Like, in my like, you could see she was kind of like, should I, can I monetize this? Like, I love just the little wheels that were spinning for her, where she was just like, "You just unlock something that is going to save me so much time." And again, she was really, really little, but I remember that moment of just that unlock for her. And we get that when we are in community, in the sense of working with other people, getting other people's takes, other people's opportunities to contribute, to say, hey, I have a hack or a shortcut, or there might be another thing that we can do that could save enormous amounts of our time, versus, like in Ava's case, enlarging the period to very large font. Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
perfect. It's a great
Yeah.
metaphor.
Yeah, and I hope I have her permission. I'll double check that I have her permission to share that. My kids are pretty flexible. They're like, at this point, they're like, "You do you, mama. We're good." But yeah, again, it's just that we don't know what we don't know. And when we think about these practices of setting up our days by design, so we can work efficiently and resourcefully and effectively, so it does meet those long-term thinking goals, I just really want to just again appreciate that we don't know what we don't know. And there is a lot of noise about some hacks and fixes out there in the world that are being shared about, like, oh, you have to do this and do that. But what I'm hearing in our conversation today is just that clarity of figuring out, like, what is it that we're working towards? What do I do today that's going to help facilitate that? And just not getting perhaps as tied up in some of these hype cycles that are out there when it comes to goal setting and thought leadership and all the things that we've been chatting about.
Yeah, absolutely. And hype cycles can be nice in some ways. Actually, my favorite thing is revisiting the hype cycle when it's already crashed. Like I
Yes.
was I was thinking the other day about I was having a conversation with people about like Kaizen.
Yes.
And Kaizen is like nobody really talks about it anymore. But it
Yeah.
was like this hot thing like
Yeah.
20 years ago. And it was like a Japanese, management style
Yes.
about continuous improvement. And
Mhm.
it's not that the idea of continuous improvement has been disproven. Like,
Yes.
this is still a good idea to
Yes.
continuously improve. Why don't we
Yeah.
do that? But yeah, everybody's hyped up about different things. But there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned from excavating the past.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I love that. And you're absolutely right. That 1%, right? We still talk about it today. People talk about this kind of these, and these incremental improvements. And I feel like the underlying principles are there. And I feel like sometimes, though, it's almost a little bit overwhelming, though, because it feels like, just from an outsider kind of looking in, sometimes it feels like everybody else has this figured out. And it's like, no, no, no. We're all actively doing experiments, right? To me, how we do our work, our life by design, is just a series of experiments, where I don't think any one person has it all figured out in any life domain. I think what we're doing is taking pieces and parts, doing little experiments. Does this work for me? Does this not work for me? And figuring out what makes sense for you. And it might not necessarily be the same for everybody, although it's really lovely when we see some of the results in the research that says, hey, this is going to work for the majority of us. And let's give that a go.
Totally, yeah.
So when people are thinking about, again, I'm super mindful of your time, and we'll bring this to a close quickly. Is there any real, like, top of mind new piece of information, as we honor the past, new piece of information that's like getting Dory fired up right now? Like, I know you've done an amazing body of work. Is there anything right now top of mind that you're like, Robin, this is something that I'm thinking a lot about, I care deeply about, or just whatever's getting Dory fired up today?
Oh, well, for a while, I would say that the thing that is most interesting for me, as we think about long-term thinking, I am super interested in the implications of expanded lifespan
Yes.
and what that means for people's careers and for their lives and for making meaning in it. I mean, I will give you an example. It Because this stuff is really happening now. I mean, in
Yeah.
particular, I think about AI and everyone's like, "Oh, well, how much is like real with AI and how much is hype and
Yeah.
whatever." And there's lots of ways to parse it. I think one of the areas for me where the benefit seems to be absolutely the clearest is in terms of health.
Yes.
And we have Alpha Deep Fold, which is
Mhm.
already effective in coming up with different structures for molecules and medicines and things
Yeah.
like that, which is awesome. And even in the past couple of years, I mean, I can't even imagine what 5 years, what 10 years is going to be. There was a service where you can get these. pay to play, like out of
Yeah.
pocket MRIs. And I was going to sign up for it. It was $1,500. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, it's a little
Yeah.
pricey, but great. That's a
Yeah.
valuable thing. I will do it. They just dropped the price to $500.
Mhm.
And the fact that you can get a full body MRI done,
Mhm.
largely powered by AI for
Yeah.
$500. I mean, we remember in 2000 this was $1 billion that it took to
Yes.
sequence people's genomes,
Yeah.
and now we're at the place where things legitimately are becoming affordable. I mean,
Yeah.
we have, a few $100 here, a few $100 there for people who have middle class incomes in developed countries. These things are absolutely within reach.
Yes.
And we don't know how to expand lifespan indefinitely, but it is 100% clear that if you can prevent, and detect illnesses when they are early,
Yes.
the, the benefits, it is not hard at all to see people having a greater health span of 10 or 20 years at a
Mhm.
minimum, where they're able to have viable and successful careers
Yeah.
into their 80s and beyond. And so I feel like that is a change that is coming absolutely right now.
Yeah. I love how you position that, and absolutely that accessibility piece of we're able to have the opportunity to get good information in a way that before it wasn't even available for many of us. And there was, again, from a price point, but also even just from an access point, like people weren't able to get that information, and now we can. And how is that going to benefit the future? And I think that ties in so beautifully with all of your work around long-term thinking, is that if there are decisions that I can make today, or as you say so beautifully, these favors that I can do for myself that will essentially pay these dividends in the future. This is just so encouraging. And as somebody who studies hope, I think that is really lovely to hear somebody like, again, when we think about your work, Dory, like we hear Columbia, we hear Harvard, we hear Duke, like you are at that forefront of just such amazing thought leadership. And this idea about AI for hope, for good, that's a beautiful message. So thank you for taking the time to share that with me today and the folks who are listening. And I hope we can have many more of these conversations, because it's pretty inspiring to know that there are people like you who are thinking about things like this that are going to set us up for these big bright futures. So Dory, thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Robin, thank you. It's great talking with you.
Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.